Hey students, I got a couple questions here about converting units, and as we get started here in this first chapter. So I know I did a bunch of videos and help in the lecture, but I thought maybe I'd put a summary together because there's two kind of clever ways I like of converting units. Let me show you both. Maybe I'll start here. What if I were to tell you, and I'll start with some easy numbers, 1 week. And you go, okay, we have 1 week, and we want to change that to days. Or maybe I'll, instead of 1 week, maybe I'll do 4 weeks. All right, 4 weeks. So I've got 4 weeks. And the question is, how many days is that? And so this is what's meant by converting of units. Now, keep in mind what this really means. This means a mathematical, kind of like, 5x would mean x plus x plus x plus x plus x. And so x added 5 times. And so this really means a week plus a week plus a week plus a week. And so what I'm trying to say here is the mathematics here really means multiplication. And so there's a couple of ways, and these are the two ways I want to show you of converting units. And that's this whole idea that we want to keep this the same. And so I like to use this phrase, use the same rules of mathematics for your numbers and for your units. So in other words, if you multiplied 4 weeks by the number 1, you would still have 4 weeks. Nothing would really change. But the key for converting units then, and this is the kind of the first method, is to say, let's get a clever number 1 so that we change the units from weeks to, in this case, days. Now, obviously right here, multiplying by just the number 1 was kind of useless. We ended up with the same number 4 and the same units week, so it didn't do anything. But the number 1 can also be written as a quotient, where if what you put on the top is the same as the bottom, it is equal to a 1. And so technically you're not changing the value of 4 weeks. However, you may be modifying it to a different unit or a different number. And here's what I mean by that. So I'll take 4 weeks, and I'll think of a clever number 1 that has the same thing on the top and the same thing on the bottom. But I want to get rid of weeks, and so there's the key. Put weeks on the bottom. And this is the key. Just kind of put a little parentheses, put a line, and note that the first thing to do is to look at what units you want to get rid of and put that on the bottom. So I want to get rid of weeks. Okay. And I want to convert that into days. And so put that on the top. Because then if you do apply your mathematics to the units, a week on top of a week cancel off, and you're ending up with days. And so that's kind of the logic. And I'll say it again. You're going to then multiply by a clever number 1, where the thing you want to get rid of goes on the bottom and the thing you want to convert it to goes on the top. Now, of course, it has to be equal to 1, so you would have to put something like 7 days is 1 week. And of course, as you know, the top, 7 days, is the same as the bottom, 1 week. And so that's just a number 1. But it's a clever number 1 that it gets rid of weeks and changes it to days. And so then you can just take your numbers, 4 times 7, and get 28 days. So that's kind of the mechanism and the logic. I'll say it again. The logic is we're just multiplying by a number 1. And the logic is we get rid of the units by putting the one we want to get rid of in the denominator and the one we want to convert it to in the numerator. And so that's basically it. I mean, and this can continue and do something more clever. For example, what if I gave you something like 3 yards? And I asked you to convert that into a certain number of inches. How many inches is that? Well, let's start with the number yards and then say, okay, we're going to do a clever conversion. And we want to get rid of yards, so I'll put yards in the bottom, and we want to convert it into inches. So I'll put inches in the top. And so again, you can see that yards would cancel with yards, and you would be left with inches. And that's kind of the logic here. Now, of course, this has to be a clever number one, and of course we know 1 yard is 36 inches. So then we have 3 times 36, which is, what, 108? 3 times 8 is 90, and then 18. Yeah, 108. So we get 108 inches. Now, again, maybe we could do it this way. Maybe it's a multiple step process where we maybe don't know that there are 36 inches in a yard, but we want to get rid of yards and convert it into feet because we know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. And so this first clever number one gets rid of yards and converts it into feet. And if we actually then multiplied it out, we'd get 9 feet. So then maybe we would do a second one, and again want to get rid of feet and get to inches. And again, the clever number one is we know that 12 inches is 1 foot. So then we would have 9 times 12, 90, which is again 108 inches. And so the logic extends from just, a number one clever to 2 number ones. Now maybe my choice of units were poor because I did kind of the English system here, or empirical system. So maybe I should have said, what if I have so many kilometers and I want to know how many, say, centimeters it is. Let's say I have 0.051 kilometers. And so here's kind of my thinking. I want to get rid of kilometers, so I'll put that in the bottom. And ultimately, I want to convert it into centimeters. But I might not know how many centimeters is a kilometer, but what's really nice about the metric system is converting to the base unit is really easy. So we know that there are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So this would clearly cancel out kilometers and leave me with meters. And then I can do the same thing that I would want to get rid of meters, so I'll put it in the denominator and convert it into centimeters. And then 100 centimeters make 1 meter. And so again, it's a clever number one. So the top is the same as the bottom, and the same thing here. The top is the same as the bottom. So that's just a clever one, and that's a clever one. And it's clever in the sense that it changes it from kilometers into meters, and then this would change meters into centimeters. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would move the decimal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 centimeters. And that's what's really nice about the metric system. I don't have to grab out my calculator here and put in some numbers, although I guess these were easy enough that I still didn't need a calculator for my empirical units. But it was close. I almost got out my calculator, but fortunately I do know what 4 times 7 is, and then 3 times 36 wasn't too hard to do in your head. Okay. Now, maybe the most extreme case is, let's say I gave you 1.5 years. And I ask you, how many seconds is that? But again, watch this pattern. I'll start off with 1.5 years and then multiply by a clever number one. And I want to get rid of years. Now, it's not likely somebody's going to know how many seconds are in a year off the top. So I'll do this step by step, but I know how many days are in a year. So there's 365 days in 1 year. And so that clever multiplication right there converted years into days. Now, I want to get rid of days, and ultimately I want seconds. But again, I don't know how many seconds are in a day, but I do know that there are so many hours. In fact, I know that there are 24 hours in 1 day. So again, this is another clever number one, and day would cancel with day. And so this is ultimately telling me how many hours I have. And then I'll kind of play this same game. I want to get rid of hours. Again, don't really know how many seconds are in an hour, but I do know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So again, that would get rid of hours and get me to minutes. And then finally, if I can just kind of squeeze it on here, I would have minutes, and I put that in the bottom because I want to get rid of minutes, and then seconds. And again, 60 seconds makes 1 minute. So this first clever number 1 changes the years to a day, the next one changes the day to an hour, the next one changes an hour into a minute, and the next one changes a minute into seconds. And so ultimately, I get how many seconds. And for this, I'll get the calculator out. So I'll start with 1.5 and then multiply it by 365, although I forgot to hit, times 365. Then times the 24. Now, I guess technically you can go divide by 1, so maybe I will, but that's not necessary. I didn't do it over here. Here, times 60 and technically divided by 1 if you want. Okay. Times 60 and again technically divided by 1. But division by 1 is not needed on a calculator. But if there had been something else in here, then that would have been important. Anyways, when I hit enter, I get, looks like 4.73. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 10 to the 7 seconds. So that's the best thing I can do, is showing you converting of units by just, and I'll say it again, going back to page 1 here. In fact, maybe I should label this page 1 and the one behind it here, just in case we need to come back, page 2. But again, here's the idea. Start with what you want and make a ratio where the top is the same as the bottom. That means it's a number to 1. That means you're not going to really change it, but you are going to put then the units of what you want to get rid of in the bottom and what you want to convert it to in the top, so that the ones that you want to get rid of cancel off, and you're left with the ones you want to get to. And then you just got to put the numbers together. So that's kind of logic number 1. And that's what most of you have probably been exposed to. I think that's the easiest way to convert units. It's kind of straightforward. It's very mechanical. It's probably what you learned in middle school and in high school. But, you know, we could go one step further. And I'll show you this too. This is kind of nice. I call it the direct substitution method. It's a little faster, but not as mechanical. So it has the potential of messing up, except if you remember this, that what I said earlier, the number and the units obey the same rules of mathematics. So in other words, if I had something like, well, let's just go through the same problems. Okay. So if I had 4 weeks, page 3. So I had 4 weeks, and I want to convert that into the number of days. Now, we did this, but I kind of also like this method, that you could say, well, a week, you could even put a 1 in front of it if you want, is equal to 7 days. And so just like you were doing a math problem where you had something like, 5x, and then somebody told you x was equal to 3, you would substitute in the value of x, which is a 3, and then you would complete the arithmetic and get a 15. And I can do the same thing here. I could say a week is the same as 7 days, and so I'll just put 7 days. And that's what I mean by a direct substitution. You just replace what a week is equal to, noting that this really meant 4 times weeks. And so just like 5 times x, and I can place in the value of x, I can replace in the value of week. So now I have 4 times 7, which is 28. And so then you just finish the arithmetic and you get 28 days. And that's exactly, essentially the same thing we did with a little more or different way of writing it when we did this first one. Oh, what? Well, let's do this one with direct substitution. Let's change 3 yards into inches. Okay, so you might start the problem with 3 yards and say, okay, well, what is a yard? equal to? And you can do a direct substitution and say, well, a yard is 3 feet. Okay, well, then you could say, well, what is a foot? Well, a foot is 12 inches. Now, I didn't write out that over here on the side, a yard is 3 feet, but that's the substitution I'm doing. And then a foot is 12 inches. And so again, I hope you kind of see that I'm just following the same rules of mathematics that I would do for my numbers, I would do for my units. And I'm just substituting in what exactly is a yard and what exactly is a foot. And then I need to complete it like I did here, the arithmetic. So 5 times 3 is 15. So in this case, I get 3 times 3, which is 9, and 9 times 12 is 108. And I get 108 inches. And so this is the direct substitution model. It's like I said, maybe a little more mathematically advanced. It's like thinking about the units as what they really are. They're actually just a variable, and you treat your units and, the same way you would any of the other mathematical properties. And so what you would do with numbers, you would also do with units. And essentially, we really are doing the same thing. And so some people prefer this because they can see all the details, and some people prefer this because it's just kind of directly getting you there. It's a direct a substitution. And in fact, I could do the same thing that I did here. I could say 0.051 kilometers. And then, again, I can do a direct substitution. What is a kilometer? Well, a kilometer is 1,000 meters. Okay. I could also do a direct substitution and say, okay, well, what is a meter? Well, a meter is 100 centimeters. And so I just did this substitution. I did a kilometer is 1,000 meters. And then I also did a meter is 100 centimeters. And now I just have to finish the mathematics, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5,100 centimeters. And again, no difference really than what we did back here on page 2. Or maybe we could do this, 1.5 years. And then we could say, okay, well, that's a year is 365 days. And then with direct substitution, we could say a day is 24 hours. Or direct substitution, we can say an hour is 60 minutes. Or finally, we can say a minute is 60 seconds. And so we just directly substitute what each unit is worth. Again, back to here. So I kind of like this one. It kind of simplifies things once you get used to it. All right, so mathematically, we should end up as before, with 4.73 times 10 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 seconds. All right, well, hopefully that is helpful, but those will be the two methods you'll see me throughout these next 2 semesters when I convert units. I'll either kind of do this multiply by 1, or I'll do a direct substitution, and that's what this first chapter is about. Trying to make sure you can convert units, especially when we start getting to units that you haven't been exposed to. And so many people are so familiar with things like a week that they go, well, okay, just multiply by 7 because there's 7, and they don't, without thinking, they've just done it so often, and they just go multiply by 7. But that comes a little bit harder when we start dealing with units like newtons and joules and henries and coulombs and some units you haven't seen yet. And so really got to understand the technique so that you don't feel intimidated when you start working with units that are new to you. All right, take care.